Jaden Reed, Jerome Ford, Isaiah Likely, even Alan Lazard. No, those are not the players I'm telling you to stash or pick up this week, or maybe at all this year in fantasy football. That's a list of players that were among the top waiver wire ads in week one of last year's fantasy football season. Why am I telling you this? Because you know what? Missing out on those top waiver pickups in the first week of the season, it's not always the worst thing in the world. Yeah, I know we think we got it all figured out for the rest of the 2025 season. We don't. So let's try to get ahead of the game as we do. We're going to beat the breakout. Let's figure out who are some players you want to stash and maybe not have to fight for on the waiver wire next week or beyond. We have to start with the biggest development of week one. It's that Travis Etienne is the guy in Jacksonville. So long, Tank Bigsby. And now everybody is, well, I can't even say picking up because Etienne was owned in a lot of leagues. But if he's out there trying to get him, blowing all their fab, trying to trade for him, this guy could be a league winner. Maybe he will be. But don't forget, there's another running back that a lot of analysts really liked throughout the offseason and maybe actually the Bucky Irving in this system, Blashall Tootin. Goes without saying, he's the clear RB2 now behind Etienne, and he didn't do a whole lot in week one, which is to be expected because he's a rookie late round running back, and they still did have Tank Bigsby, even if you didn't realize it in week one. He was still out there. So Tootin only carried the ball 3 times for 11 yards. He didn't have a single target in the passing game. In fact, he didn't even run a route. But that's okay because, again, it's early. Now we've got to say that, a lot of people just want this to be a thing because he's a rookie running back, a late round pick, and the Liam Cohen, Bucky Irving connection. It's too obvious, right? And now it is becoming more obvious because Tank is gone. And the reason why they did this is because they feel like they were pretty happy with what they got. And you know that there's no NFL head coach that is just happy with exactly one running back. They've got to feel good about all the players in that backfield. And well, let me tell you why some analysts were high on Tootin this offseason. He's got crazy athleticism, and I mean it. I mean, it's kind of insane. Look, a 4.32 40-yard dash, a speed score in the 98th percentile, and the folks at RAS Football have something called relative athletic score, document all the metrics that matter to try to figure out how athletic a player is. Well, according to their stats, Blashall Tootin ranked 95th out of 2,106 running backs that they've scored since 1987. Not sure if that's good. Is that good? Yes, it's good. He's extremely fast. We know this. He's got that shiftiness, that elusiveness that you want, and he is a really good pass catcher. We saw at Virginia Tech. There's a guy who's very versatile, and that's why he stuck around, why he was drafted, and then why he stuck around, and why Tank Bigsby didn't. Tank was just not an asset in any way as a receiver. Now, your chances of getting Tootin right now in any fantasy football league are about 50-50. And I'm telling you, it's really close because he's about 50% owned, a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on what platform you play on. And while, some people are, of course, trying to pick him up already because they see that Bigsby's gone, I've seen that he's been dropped in some leagues because you need to clear room to get, one of these other guys. Maybe you need a tight end because of Kittle being hurt. Maybe you need a new quarterback because yours is no good. Picking up one of these players that had a great week one, like Javonte Williams, Hollywood Brown, or someone like Harold Fannin, right? When you make those decisions, like, am I going to go over one of those guys who just had a big game, or am I going to keep Blashall Tootin? I've seen it happen. In fact, did a little research in my one Yahoo Public League that I have for research purposes. Tootin was just dropped. Now, I know based on the way Etienne looked in the first game of the season, it just looked like he is it, right? And nobody else is going to be a factor here. That's just not how this works. And sure, Travis Etienne could just be the lead back all season long, but Tootin will develop a role eventually at some point. And I mean, who knows exactly how big that role could be. Let's talk about another late round rookie running back whose role was shockingly big in week one, although I'll explain why. So in Indianapolis, you got Jonathan Taylor, and then there's DJ Giddens, who now is very clearly the only RB behind JT. Now, it might open some eyes if you just look at the stats here and see he had 12 carries, 41 yards. Did not expect Giddens or anyone to have that many touches in the backfield besides JT. But this is a tale of two halves, and this is just pure game script, in fact. So the first half of that Colts-Dolphins blowout, JT was the only running back who touched the ball at all, 100% snap share. Nobody else was even in the backfield. And then when it was pretty clear that the game was out of hand already at halftime, then Giddens did get a fair amount of touches. there was really no reason for Jonathan Taylor to stay out there. And we did hear that there was something like a minor injury, shouldn't bother him, but of course, why not just pull him out of caution? So if Giddens getting double-digit carries in the first game of the season gives you any reason to pause on Jonathan Taylor as a bell cow, it shouldn't, right? Not at all. And I don't think the Colts are going to blow out every team they face. But what's encouraging here is that Giddens was the only other back involved. He leapfrogged Khalil Herbert in the preseason. Nobody else is a factor. There's not a three-man committee or any sort of rotation here. It's just JT and then Giddens, and God forbid something happens to Jonathan Taylor at any point in the season. Giddens is going to be a must-add, like an absolute must-add for a still run-heavy team that looked a lot better on offense here. Yeah, I don't think you have to stash Giddens just because you have Jonathan Taylor, but it is a very good idea. Giddens also super athletic, speed score 92nd percentile, 95th percentile burst score, and interestingly enough, player profiler, their closest comp to him is Travis Etienne. Giddens is the kind of back that nobody will really think about unless something, God forbid, happens to Jonathan Taylor with an injury. But look, I'm going to say this. If you got JT, it is a great idea to stash Giddens right now. Not an absolute must, but like if you can afford to, I would do it. And if you've got room, if it's a deep enough league and you're just looking for some upside, if Tootin's not there, Giddens has to be your next choice. Now, not often that we talk quarterback because, I mean, let's face it, we know who the starting quarterbacks are in the NFL, and either you want them or you don't. How can you stash somebody? You can if it's a rookie who is just basically waiting in the wings here, and it may not be very long before Jackson Dart is the starter in New York. I mean, we all thought this could happen at some point, right? Maybe just inevitable. Week 2? Okay, not quite, but look, Brian Daboll didn't even answer immediately after the game as far as whether Russ was the guy in week 2. He had to think about it, and then he did come out and say, okay, Russ is the starter, but man, what if week 2 is as bad or worse as week 1? Look, let's face it, he wasn't good. 46% completion percentage, no touchdowns, just looked off target here, and this whole offense just looked like a mess. And look, I don't think that Russ is completely cooked as a quarterback, but look, in Denver, I wore out his welcome. They let him go. Pittsburgh, it took what, half a season worth of starts, let him go. I don't see it happening here. Now, I will also say this. My concerns with Jackson Dart potentially is the fact that this offense is just completely broken. I really feel like Brian Daboll might be a lame duck coach before long. I mean, I know everyone's talking about how bad the Dolphins looked, rightfully so. When was the last time the Giants looked anything close to good? And now they got all these veteran quarterbacks here with Winston and Russ. Now they got this first round pick and Jackson Dart, and we haven't seen anything better yet. I know it's been one game, but like I said, if it goes south in week 2 already, this whole team just could be a dumpster fire. That said, at least we know Jackson Dart is a young, talented quarterback who can bring something new here. And for what it's worth, he looked sharp in the preseason, looked better than Russ, a 68% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's not a dual threat quarterback, so he doesn't have the highest ceiling, but he's mobile. He'll bring at least some element of running. He ran for 495 yards last year, and let's remember that this is a guy that, even though he was in the SEC, he led the conference with 4,279 passing yards, a 69.3% completion percentage, QB rating off the chart. And this is why he snuck into the first round after really not getting a lot of attention before the season had started. Now, real talk, in a single QB league, Jackson Dart shouldn't be your starting quarterback. Probably at any point this season. There are just way too many other quarterbacks in better systems. But your super flex leagues, your 2 QB leagues, your leagues where everybody hoards 2 or 3 quarterbacks and then your quarterback gets hurt or for some reason was Russell Wilson. Yeah, okay, there you can consider Dart. All right, now it's time for some young receivers that you might want to get on your bench if you got space. All right, second stash video of this season. We already have our first repeat. Last week, I talked about Alec Iominor of the Titans, said he could have a bigger role than expected, and guess what? It was even bigger than I expected. He wound up with some really impressive numbers in terms of targets and I guess you could say attention and usage, not so much the stats, right? But look, this matters. 28% target share. He was top 20 in targets per route run, tied with guys like Keenan Allen and Jacoby Myers. And yet, while those two vets had big fantasy days, Iron Minor 2 catches for 13 yards. The difference is those two are on pretty good teams with veteran quarterbacks like Justin Herbert and Geno Smith, and Iron Minor's on the Titans with a rookie quarterback who made his first start ever. But let's also keep in mind with Cam Ward, although the stats weren't great for him, he looked good on film. This is said by many, many people. I agree. And look, he's going to be a good quarterback. This was a very tough matchup, not just his first start, but Denver defense. Not a great spot for a passing offense. Iron Minor's role was big. He was one of the leaders in team air yard share and somehow wound up second in targeted air yards. I said it before, air yards in and of itself isn't always a predictor of fantasy production or just production in general or yardage. Those air yards have to connect eventually and become actual yards. And there's a lot of guys who have those unrealized air yards. Also talked before the season about Kayshon Boutte. And you see what happened? Those air yards got realized. It will take some time for Aya Minor and Cam Ward to connect, but man, the opportunity is already there. They are already grooming this guy to be their starting X receiver. And we've seen the way he was used. He was out on the field all the time. Now, he's always going to be out wide. They don't move him around a lot. He's not getting those slot snaps. That's not what he's going to do, right? This is a guy who's going to make plays down the field, and that's why the air yards are there. And so the good and the bad here, well, the good news is it's chunk yardage, big plays down the field. The bad is they're not always going to connect, right? You're going to see that volatility. But on the one hand, at least he's got that ceiling when those big plays connect, and he's definitely going to be a red zone threat based on his size. Now, another young receiver who I guarantee absolutely nobody has heard of because he's 0.0% owned in all formats is Casey Washington. And I was actually really encouraged by his usage too, but not exactly thrilled about the fact that just today he's on the injury report with a concussion. So we may not see anything of him in week 2. Might be too early for me to say that, but even so, again, we're talking stash. We're thinking long term here, anyways. Now, Casey Washington had kind of shockingly high usage in the season opener here for Atlanta. He was also on the targeted air yard leaderboard. He led the Atlanta Falcons in snaps. And I mean that nobody besides the quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., was on the field more than Casey Washington. And not only did he lead the Falcons in routes run, he was second in the entire NFL in routes run in week 1. How is Casey Washington on the field so much? And nobody knows who he is, and he still actually didn't do much anyways. Well, Darnell Mooney didn't play in this game, right? Had that shoulder injury before the season, didn't suit up, and so Washington was his replacement. And then also late in the game, Drake London with another shoulder injury, and those guys are both on the injured list right now. Day to day, there's a good chance London plays, it sounds like. And as I said, now we're not even sure about Washington. But I think the fact that he was next in line, he was on the field that much. Again, sometimes teams use kind of a rotation for certain positions. There was none of that. It was all Washington. This is another guy that really is a prototypical X receiver when he's on the field. So with Drake London out there, obviously the targets aren't going to go in his favor too much in Kyle Pitts. If it's legit, I mean, yeah, who knows? This is also a situation, though, while the Falcons do like to run the ball, they will pass it a fair amount, and they might need to while that defense still kind of develops. And Washington is a guy who has a lot of promise and upside in the future. They actually use him a lot like Drake London, not just in terms of the snaps and the routes run and all that, but in terms of where he lines up. He's out wide about 70% of the time, and he was in the slot about 30% of the time. OC Zach Robinson is a guy who likes to use a lot of pre-snap motion, get his players in position to succeed. I have a lot of confidence in this offense. Michael Penix Jr., what we saw in his first game of the season, this is a potential for an explosive offense at times. And look, let's face it, we weren't sure what the wide receiver depth situation was behind London, behind Mooney. I think now we know right now Washington is clearly the number 3. And if injuries persist for Mooney and or London, he could all of a sudden start to get those targets. And on the flip side, a guy who was barely on the field, but Isaac Tesla, and you saw that pretty impressive touchdown grab. So are we going to go all in on a guy just because he happened to catch a pass that was a touchdown? Why not just chase a guy like Jake Tonges, right? But we know that Tesla has been getting hype all preseason long. The Lions are definitely an offense you want to have a part of if he's going to have a role. The question is, what is his role? It was almost non-existent, and honestly, if it wasn't for that catch, then it would have been a huge dud for him. I mean, not only was that his only catch, He only was on the field for 3 snaps. But after the game, head coach Dan Campbell, who's a man of his word, he even said he envisions a bigger role for Tesla after that impressive grab. I doubt it's going to be too big just yet. But again, rookie here, he's going to continue to increase that role, especially if he makes plays like that. So, this is the number 3 wide receiver in Detroit. Absolutely, there's some fancy relevance here, and you already seen that he's a potential red zone threat. He's got the size and he's got the opportunity here. Just don't get too hyped, right? Again, touchdown's a touchdown, and I know some people like, look, he went off in the preseason, and sure, he actually finished second among all wide receivers in fantasy points per game. But then if you look at the list, then it's as usual preseason leaders are a bunch of guys who are not in the NFL anymore. So push that aside. I know we love Lions players in fantasy. Tesla is still going to be just kind of a bye week filler, a streamer at times. But as always, something happens to JMO, something happens to Sun God. All of a sudden, you got a guy that is going to be very interesting on the waiver wire. And then let's bring it full circle here. Start talking about Tootin and Jacksonville, your priority stash if you've got the space. So I think I need to address the question is, what about Tank Bigsby? Do you continue to hold on to him? Is he worth stashing now that he's in Philly, or do you let him go? Well, here's the thing. Some people view this as, hey, he's the RB2 now behind Saquon Barkley. This is a prime handcuff. This is a guy who, again, I'll admit, got a little carried away in the preseason. I assumed that Tank Bigsby would be the lead runner, or at least one of the leaders of the committee in Jacksonville, and Liam Cohen had other ideas. Obviously, what they showed in the preseason based on depth chart and usage and all that, yeah, just forget. It's all out the window now. So what we're hearing about why this deal was made on the Phillies side, it's not necessarily that they think Tank has to be the RB2 here. We don't like Will Shipley. It's not so much about that. It's because they're looking for help on kickoffs, which is weird because Tank Bigsby has not really done a lot of kickoff returning in the NFL, but I guess they like what they saw on film, and they don't like what they've got there currently because Will Shipley, who was the RB2 or maybe still is, he fumbled on a kickoff return in week 1 and also got hurt. He got a rib injury. Now they're saying the injury isn't that serious. It's not about him, but it's got to be at least a little bit about him. Remember, the Eagles are also a team that just traded a couple weeks ago for John Mechie. This is also strictly a special teams move. When you hear special teams, this makes you think this guy has no on-field value, right? But again, if push comes to shove, if Barkley happens to miss time, who's getting the majority of the carries here? Is it Shipley? Is it Bigsby? Is it a committee? Probably both. Who would I prefer? It's still Tank Bigsby. And come on, this is the Philadelphia Eagles offense. So with all that said, look, if you need a receiver, tight end, you just want to get somebody on the waiver wire and you need to drop a player, you can drop Tank Bigsby. You do not have to stash him. And, hopefully we don't ever need to think about any running back in Philly other than Saquon Barkley. Just keep tabs on him because, again, if the worst happens, I think that he becomes the 1A for the Eagles. All right, go ahead and start stashing if you can. Remember, if you didn't get the guys you want on the waiver wire, there's always week 2. We're going to have you covered right after the games end on Sunday. We've already got your start sit decisions made for you. Check them all out on this playlist.